Welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast, focused on providing valuable information for anyone looking to undertake a new build or extension project. We'll share our tips, tricks and stories from a building designer's perspective.
Welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast. I'm your host Amelia, and if you've been following along from last week, we were joined for part one with our very own Frank Geskus and special guest Mick from Town Planning Solutions to talk all about planning and all of his experience as a planner. So we're going to dive straight into part two. Enjoy, everyone.
Why do council accept, I've got here written poor drawings, but crap drawings which are done on a napkin, yet when you go look at the requirements on all the websites provide these drawings? Now, I need to be clear here to everyone, you don't have to be a designer or an architect to actually submit drawings for planning approval, which still blows my mind. You are given whatever's presented in front of you, whether it's accurate or not, you have to assess that at the local government level. And it's always ticked me off that you go online, you have a look at this, and they got passed. We put a plan in, it's got levels, everything's spot on, it's correct, and we're going through hell because it's accurate.
Can we park that one for later?
No,
I didn't think you'd say yes.
No. Come on. So, because I've had this argument with a few heads of planning in around the state, and they said customers won't accept it. The councillors bang on about, we're making it too hard for people to make submissions. Well, they shouldn't be making submissions as far as I'm concerned. If the drawings are not accurate, how does a planner make a good assessment against the scheme if it's not accurate?
One of the things you learn over the years when you do this, bearing in mind I worked directly in local government for, 24 years or something stupid like that. You learn a lot of tricks about how to deal with those applications, especially since the Tasmanian planning scheme came in, because that's standardised the requirements for the applications a lot, better than it was anyway. So a lot of those things you need to understand how to ask for what you need, and whether that's a survey that confirms the buildings are even capable of fitting on the title, because I have had that in the past, or you need some plans that actually, a really common example is they locate the floor level of the dwelling and the ground level, both existing and what's proposed, and actually give you height dimensions.
That's a bonus. Actually, levels is a bonus.
Yeah, I know.
Accurate levels.
I know.
So does it actually fit within the envelope?
Exactly.
Can you actually get the car up the driveway?
Yes. Mind you, planning, in all fairness, is not allowed to look at whether the car goes up the driveway.
No, but it gets referred to the engineering department now, which is good considering wonderful development on Eccleston Road out at Riverside, West Tamar, where I think I shared where I've got a video of my neighbour with a 5-tonne excavator that slid down the driveway because it was so steep. Everyone drives past this and their eyes are just boggling how steep this thing is. And it got passed, but I believe it never got referred to the engineering department.
But even if it did...
It might have been, the drawings may not have been accurate.
Well, even if the drawings were accurate, the slope on the driveway is not actually a planning consideration for houses.
No, but the engineering department requires to meet the off-street parking code.
Only when it's units.
This was units, would you believe?
Oh, God. Oh,
yeah. Well. I'll give you the address later and go just blow your mind when you see this thing. It's just next level. Like the wheelie bins, you can see the wheelie bins are on their own treated pine platform next to the driveway, not next to the house, and like they're hanging out of the ground. Just two wheelie bins next to each. That's how steep this thing is.
Oh, I think I know where you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty special of what not to do.
Well, look, planning is a bit fun because I've worked directly for 6 councils, and in some of those we've actually had pretty local provisions that have dealt with some of the really contentious issues locally. And the best one was out at Lagana, there used to be control that you could have multiple dwellings on 2 adjoining sites, but not 3 or more. When the state housing standards came in, which were part of that thing from the federal government, that control got taken out. So ever since then, I think you'll find, and West Tamar can correct me if they want to, you'll pretty much find every DA that's gone to council for multiple dwellings, somebody's complaining because there's too many units, they're too close together, and they swap the subdivisions. But the state, in their wisdom, removed the control that actually managed that.
Yeah.
So
going back to the drawings, building surveyors, like for us now, submitting for building approval, we've got a minimum documentation set. Best thing that ever happened, I felt. For the builders, for everyone, they can assess it correctly. They can even quote it accurately. But some of the council planning departments even though they state it, still accept poor documentation. And I don't understand from a risk point of view. And I'd love to talk to a couple of the other head planners about it, but I know they get belted by the councillors because the public complains directly to their mate that's on the council and they come and have a word with them.
Oh, look, it's one of those things. We have a planning scheme now that sets some pretty consistent requirements around the state. It sets consistent application requirements, but it doesn't require applications to be made by somebody who puts together a competent application, unlike other states.
Yeah.
So it's the devil in the deep blue sea. You don't want to be the council planner who accepts the really, really bad application, but at the same time you don't want to be the council planner who gets blasted because they refuse to accept the application. And sometimes you end up in a position where you have no choice. It would be a lot easier if applications were regulated a lot like the building process,
Yes,
where you had
certainly.
to be a specified person to make them.
Yes.
Or even prepare the documents. But the state has given us a more complex planning scheme without providing that degree of regulation to support it.
It's a bit of a shame, but I think less mistakes could potentially happen. But it's not a mistake because you're only assessing what you've been given.
Yep.
So my question is, so you've got all this criteria that you have to meet when you go through planning, and say everything is ticked off on that and it's approved. Have you looked at some plans and even though it is all approved, it's dumb, it doesn't work, or it's a dumb idea, or even though you've ticked all those boxes? I'm sure that would come up occasionally.
Let's see. How do I answer that one? There isn't a test on dumbness in the planning scheme, so it's not something we can consider.
But you've ticked all the boxes, like all the things.
Yeah.
They work.
You meet the requirement.
Apparently, from the requirements, they all work. And it's going to come up every now and then that something is maybe slightly outside of that box, but it still technically meets it.
Or it's a really, really bad outcome.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It's a bad outcome.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's something, way back when, that's actually one of the reasons we ended up with the Tasmanian planning scheme, because there was a lot of complaints from the broad development sector about how some councils argued for this or that, other councils didn't, so there had to be one scheme. Now there's one scheme. We've got this funny situation where there's some odd outcomes and then there's some that are just dumb.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean they're regulated through the planning scheme. Mm-hmm. There is a review underway at the moment on those standards with the State Planning Office, but I don't know, I can't say off the top of my head where that's at or what additional issues will be addressed through that process. There isn't a final answer on that yet.
Interesting. So should planners have personal opinions on projects?
Well, planners are usually people in my experience, and most
True.
people have opinions. So,
Yes. Yeah, no, that's true. And
But to answer your question, and the good example that I have is one of my former colleagues who, in an appeal, in response to a challenge from a lawyer, said, yes, your client may well be a certain type of person, insert something far more colourful, but that's not a planning issue I can consider.
yes. Yep. So
And I think it comes back to that point, Frank, that you've said plenty of times before. It's interpretation.
and at times it is. And that's why you would have seen that at appeals tribunals.
Oh, yeah.
Different interpretation. And you have planners, planning lawyers, experts in certain fields all arguing over this application.
And we've even had decisions issued by the tribunal, whether it's somebody's big O opinion or their little O opinion. So their formal opinion or their informal opinion.
Yes.
Now, I don't know about you, but one of the things I do like about some of the more recent building reforms is you now have determinations from the Director of Building Control. Whether they're right or wrong,
Exactly.
at least you know what the bloody rules mean.
Yeah, exactly. When they do answer it. So
Well,
early
but
on,
you've got the mechanism under building that we don't have under planning.
which is very true. And I suppose didn't appreciate it because we deal with it all the time. One of the guys said, hey, this is the interpretation of the determination, and just for a client, they were asking questions. And we could literally go through and then check another section. No, it has to be this, this, and this. We could determine it. And occasionally you get those 1%ers that doesn't work, and then you can go to CBOS and ask the question, but it takes a while for them to get back.
Yeah, but you're not having to go through the application process, then you have to lodge the appeal, then you go through the whole appeal process, you engage your consultant planner, your other experts, your lawyer.
Totally.
You get an answer that is something else entirely.
But we've got TASCAT
Exactly.
in building now.
But
That's
then
starting to come in.
I mean, we had one when I was at West Tamar where council actually had to take TASCAT, or RIMPAT as it was back then, to the Supreme Court to challenge their decision because it was wrong.
Gee, that'd go down well, wouldn't it? But
Well,
you've
council
got
won.
to do it. But you've got to do it though, don't you?
Yeah, and I think there needs to be a different process there where those types of questions can be put to a central agency.
I agree.
And you can
Should
just
have to go
get
to
the answer.
Central Court. It's ridiculous to go to Supreme Court for that stuff.
Well, a planning appeal, you need to start thinking in tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh, very much so.
And if you're going to the Supreme Court, that's multiples of that. So,
You've got to be dead serious, don't you?
yeah, you do. And you've got to have the resources available.
Exactly.
Have I answered your question?
Yeah. Councillors, or aldermen, are we allowed to call them aldermen anymore?
For cities, I think.
It's still
if they
aldermen.
choose to.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, people that have been elected onto the council, in some cases, make the final decisions on the applications. And it's a very interesting process, and there are very much opinions come in, and they would admit that too. My question to you, do you think they should have greater training due to they have to make decisions based on the planning officers within the councils, which I believe are generally pretty good? Sometimes they go against it, their own planning advice. Do you think some of the councils need to do better training for them to do their own assessments?
I think I need to not dig myself in a hole.
I know. When I was thinking about asking this, it's like I could really throw you in here, can't I?
Yeah, look, you could. Look, in my experience, most of the councillors are really good to deal with most of the time on planning issues.
Yeah.
There's always that 1% that you mentioned earlier. The issue that I have is that the training on planning isn't compulsory where it should be. And because planning is a legal process set against legal criteria in a legal framework, I think that the people who make the decisions should have to do mandatory training. It should be accredited, so it should meet a minimum standard, and they should have to do professional development to maintain that standard.
The rest of us do in our profession, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
So why shouldn't they? And they're making the decision.
It's unfortunately something government hasn't really been willing to deal with. And if you looked at the recent review of the local government sector, they jumped straight to amalgamation, they kicked the planning issue out for a start.
Yeah, because I go,
Yeah, for a range of reasons that we won't go into. But then they ignored some of the bigger picture issues about improving the decision-making process.
Yeah, which is a bit of a shame because they have a massive effect on time, money. Sometimes it's emotion.
Yeah.
A lot of emotions get in there, especially you've got a whole gallery. Certain councils allow people come and talk for a couple of minutes and some don't. But, it can get pretty heated and full on from the gallery.
And look, in reality, the councillors are elected by the community to do a certain job.
Yes.
And I strongly suspect that side of this job, the planning side of it, is not that well explained before they actually get in. Then after they get voted in, they come to one of their early workshops and they have somebody like me coming up and saying, well, guess what, guys? You're part of a statutory authority. You have no say on what you do get to look at. The criteria are set and you have to make your decision based on expert evidence. Sometimes that is going to go wrong, but I think there's a lot of ways that the sector could work to improve the way those decisions are made and the qualifications that are required for those people who do that around the council table when it goes there.
Because, to be fair, some people can't read drawings. That's a fact of life.
Most people can't read drawings, Frank. That's my experience.
And that's right. And yet these people in authority have to make decisions by reading the drawings. Got reports as well. Thank goodness we do stuff in 3D modelling now. Makes it a lot easier to visualise.
Oh, yes.
So it's been a big improvement there. So that makes it tough on them too, because there's the level of liability. But I think, mandatory training would be a good thing.
Yeah, well, I'm all for it.
Because I reckon they wouldn't go against their own planners very often then, is my guess.
I suspect that if they did want to do it, there ought to be a process where they are required to get professional advice to support what they want to do.
Yes, agreed.
Rather than just making a decision at the table because, 2 days after the council meeting, day 42 is up, and if they don't make a decision, that's cost council.
The other side, which I found very amusing once, at where they refused, they couldn't agree on why they were refusing it.
Yeah.
When they had to, in the minutes, refused based on these grounds. And they were fluffing around the table. And I'm going, oh, you're kidding me. You weren't even clear why you refused it. Now, this was days gone by. I haven't been for a while, and I haven't had to go to any of these meetings since the new scheme. It's been a much better process, I must say. But days gone by, I was just shaking my head, going, you're refusing this, and you don't even know why you're refusing it, and you can't even give a good written reason.
I understand that does happen. I've been quite lucky. I've never actually had that experience when I used to work for council.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I was like shaking my head. But anyway, it's the new scheme I think has been far superior over the previous ones.
Oh, that's good feedback. Thanks.
In that sense. It does make our job a lot harder in other ways, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, but how far away is it where you've got the building envelope and the other controls set in your CAD software, your modelling software, so
Yes.
everything just gets identified up front?
Well, we also do our own planning checks, and then we have an independent person in the office do a design review.
Good.
So that's just our office. We're fortunate because there's a number of us. If you're a single operator, that's harder to do.
And I think you might have been involved in a recent discussion on this particular issue where other parts of the development sector need to improve their education about how these processes occur. And that brings up one of my bugbears. Tasmania is, as I understand, the only state where the state doesn't do professional development training on planning.
That is correct.
What the hell?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's all on building.
Yeah, when it's done.
Well, we do, and we do a lot of it. And funnily enough, in the office, we just had 3 days of in-house training.
Yeah.
But guess what? It had nothing to do with planning.
Yeah, well, having worked for
Which
council
is
for so long, it's really funny because something like the new housing controls came in way back when. You might recall I came to talk to one of the industry groups.
It was a BDAA meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Gee, I was going back a while.
Yeah, that's when the standard controls first came in.
Yeah.
That wasn't a state government thing, the people who did this to us.
Because everyone was up in arms. I thought it was a good thing for the simple reason we're more professional in what we do.
Yeah, but the state hasn't picked it up. They need to be doing the training. And at the moment, through my Planning Institute membership, I do a lot of interstate training based on what their reform programs are. You cannot do that in Tasmania.
Yeah, wow. That's a real head spin.
The
Considering
option-
how much training we've got to do in the other areas, like we do for building, plumbing, the National Construction Code, condensation, all sorts of stuff, yet nothing on planning.
Well, look, I have to do it as a planner because
Of
I'm
course.
a member of the Institute. I have to do 30 hours a year. But I can't do anything on Tasmanian systems or Tasmanian reforms or programs because the state doesn't do it because it's not resourced.
I think we're going to have to fix this because I'll guarantee you every designer and architect would love to be better at what they do, but some will just pass it on to a professional. That's fine, but I'd have to say close to 85% of all our work, we handle our own planning.
Yeah, but the problem is within the wider industry because there is no professional development on that side of things for planning. Most people don't know when to make the call, when to apply, when there's a problem, and when they need to hand it off to somebody else.
Yes. No, and that's fair. So I think we now have a chat later on how we're going to fix this.
Yep, I'm up for it.
So...
Oh, geez, we're only just on to page 2.
Yeah, I'm going to page 2 now. So the page 2 isn't that long. So strategic issues. So future of development, zoning, how it affects planning, what types of houses we need to what we get. That's a really interesting one.
I like that one, yeah.
Yes. I think a few people are going to be disappointed in the future. And then key infrastructure to make it all work. And this is what we quickly mentioned last time. People don't think of it as a holistic thing and for the future.
Yeah, and it's also, planning is only part of a process. I mean, a few years ago, everything went through bushfire for planning.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
Thankfully, that's been taken out and now it's staged between planning and building, which is the way it should be.
Yeah, that was bizarre when they brought that in because we had 2 different results, one for planning, one for building. It was bizarre.
That's one word for it. I'd probably pick something a lot more colourful.
Well, no, true, but we can't say that without funny noises bleeping our voices because it was so expensive and dumb.
Absurd outcomes.
Yeah, I don't know how they got to that point.
So, future of development. I think in Tasmania we urgently need to start having the discussions about how and where we want to live.
Fair.
When you start looking at the demographics, we know we're getting migration from interstate and overseas. We know most of those people are going to be older. We know that most of those, or a good proportion of them, want to live in a lifestyle area rather than an urban area. But then in the urban areas, we know people want to live in apartments, but they can't get them. We know people, regardless of age, want to be able to live near where they work, where the kids go to school, where they can actually do their shopping.
Which actually makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I bought an old house in West Lonnie so that I didn't have to rely on a car on the weekend.
Why not? That makes perfect sense.
It does, or it does to me.
Yeah.
But that's back when you could afford to do that.
Yeah, well, that's a fair point too. Yeah.
So there's a lot of discussions there that need to be had about how and where we want to live and what the choices mean, particularly when it comes to things like transit, moving people around, because at the moment our public transport system outside of Hobart is...
Dog shit.
A joke.
Absolute dog shit.
Yeah, okay, I'll go with that.
It's embarrassing.
And look, even where I am, I've got 2 bus stops within 100 metres, but there's no effective transport that takes me anywhere I want to go anytime I need to be there. So for all practical purposes, there's no public transport. But until the state starts having those discussions, like every other state does, and if people want a good summary of the types of discussions we need to be having, Infrastructure Victoria has got a discussion paper on the different development types that we need to plan for over the coming future, and it lays out the options on what that means and what the choices are going to be down the track. So to use public transport as an example, because we have such low housing density, we've got about, I think it's sitting around 8 to 10 dwellings per hectare on average across Tas in our urban areas. That's a long way below what you need to actually make public transport work, which I think is in the 40 to 60 dwellings per hectare range.
Everyone wants their 4-bedroom house, 5 bathrooms, al fresco, triple garage.
No, I do not.
Oh, you might, but mate, you'd be blown away some of the houses that we design.
I know.
What people request, and extraordinary the size.
I know,
but is
who
it
wants to-
affordable now,
But
though?
hang on, and I'm a little bit guilty on this myself. so I'm not totally
I
innocent.
was wondering about that. But Amelia, you've raised a good point. Is it affordable? So can you actually afford to be like that anymore? Or do we need to start looking at different ways of providing similar outcomes?
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to change. It's going to be forced to change due to economics.
Assuming government's willing to start intervening in housing policy, which is going to be a very different question.
But even then, you're looking at how we get around, where we want to work and all that. I mean, it's got to start somewhere. And I've liked some of the master planning. I talk about Hadspin, out Lagana. There's been some very cool stuff that they've put together. Makes a lot of sense.
Yes, but all of that has been driven by the local government authorities. There isn't a program for that to be done in state.
Which is a shame.
And even while we've got the Tasmanian planning policies going through the process now, and we're just starting the process to review the regional land use strategies that are meant to identify how we deal with these big picture issues, I'm not certain that the state agencies who need to back that up actually understand what these things mean and the decisions that need to be made over the next 1 to 2 to 5 to 10 years to actually make that happen.
But you've got to look further than 10 though, surely.
Oh, in my mind you do, but that doesn't mean everybody agrees with me. Realistically, you need to be looking, you need to be asking how your grandkids are going to live.
Yes, I 100% agree. And this is what frustrates me with a lot of government levels is that they can't think that far. Like I heard, Sydney, for example, I saw an article where how are they going to get water? Just normal, just basic water to all the proposed development and the projected growth by, was it 2050, it's going to be 7 or 8 million people in Sydney.
Yep.
They've still got the same water resource from, I think it was back in the 40s.
Yep.
Like basic water. So this is all this short-term thinking, and there could be political, I don't know. But it's just madness.
Well, I think a lot of it does come down to the election cycle these days.
Of course.
And unfortunately, that is a reality that we need to work our way through. But unless, being somewhat cynical or realistic depending upon your view, unless people out there actually start going to their local MPs and saying, well, where do our kids live? How do we get water? What does this mean? How are we going to get around? What happens when petrol goes to, let's say, $5 a litre? How do we get around then? Why don't we start dealing with some of those questions now so that we can actually start planning for those changes? Doesn't mean everybody has to live in an apartment, but at least then some people will have the option of buying an apartment, and it won't be 800, 900,000 for 2 bedrooms in very, very limited areas, because that's all the market can deliver at this point. There needs to be a program to start rolling out those options, to extending them out key transport networks. Say you've got Invermay Road going up through Mowbray.
Yes.
You've got West Tamar Highway.
Yes.
You've got Hobart Road. You've got Westbury Road.
Yes.
They're your 4 main transport corridors. Why don't we have a strategy from government that intensifies dwellings on those key routes so you can start to sustain your public transport? Or to use the Hobart example, why don't they start using the river as a major transport route rather than require everybody to drive everywhere?
It makes perfect sense. Look at Brisbane.
Little Sydney.
Little Sydney, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. All that. Why not? Maybe they can't think that far ahead. I don't know.
Or maybe the cost scares them off.
Well, it costs now, it does. Pays dividends in the future. Good planning saves money.
Thanks, Frank. I didn't have to say it.
Oh, it does. The strategic, it does. It's common sense. We think about when we design people's houses, when we're getting older in age, and I'll use my example. I'm 54. I might be in my house for another 10, 11 years, 12 years. I'm getting close to retirement. I've got to make sure I want to stay in that house longer. So what do? I make provisions for that. Wheelchairs, plywood in the walls, be able to put bars on, all these types of things. the LHA provisions, and we've spoken about that on the podcast, and that's coming into the building code very shortly, elements of that. So if you're planning for the future, a lot of people generally do, but plan for the future because it makes life a lot easier and cheaper.
Yeah, but what that means is people need to start planning ahead, and you need to start building the housing that we need versus the minimum standard that passes.
Well, we've spoken about the minimum standard, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
It's almost like I've listened to a few episodes.
But yeah, and we've discussed in the office too. It says even about waterproofing. We were talking about why does everyone go to the minimum? Why wouldn't you go over and above the minimum required waterproofing? The biggest failure in housing is bathroom failure with waterproofing. Bonkers.
It is.
Does my head in how we waste all this money, yet you can spend a little bit more and it's well over and above. And I'll guarantee you a majority of people that are paying for a new house would rather pay a little bit more to have the waterproofing Mickey Mouse, get it tested, so you know you'll never be a problem.
Well, you know, if that bathroom that you're putting in right now lasts a bit more than 5 or 10 years because of the failure in the waterproofing, that's got to be a good outcome.
But they don't see it. But if they saw, there's no stats. Again, there's no stats showing this, but the amount of people I've heard and people that have had failures, even in houses that we've designed where the waterproofing has failed and they've had to go back, and it's not just fixing the bathroom, it's everything around it. The water damage was extraordinary on so many of these houses. So again, not going to the minimum.
And that's a really good comparison. You've got failures in waterproofing versus failures in strategic planning because we simply haven't done it for so long at an integrated level across government. How do you fix the transport problem? How do you get the school corridor from Lagana in through Riverside during terms?
Yeah.
You can't fix that.
No.
There's no other option.
Yes.
Unless we start planning now for what happens over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
I don't believe they have enough statistics in so many areas to actually read, hey, this is real, this is what's going to happen, these are the projections.
Well, actually, that's a really, really good point because I agree, and we've worked out, a bunch of us planners, over a bottle of red and, you know, solving the world's problems.
Sounds like it's when we have Building Designers Conference, we do the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Goes
something
to
like
late
that.
in the night.
Yeah, that's it. But we've worked out you need to monitor your growth. You need to work out and monitor what land is available for development, how that's being taken up, what the speed is, what it's being used for, how many dwellings are not being approved but actually being created and occupied. And they're slightly different sets of data to what government typically develops. But those conversations are not really happening that well. And even when they do happen with government, you need to get the funding. And then in order to really make things happen, they have to report on it. If they don't report on things, they don't get followed up.
No, but if you've got inadequate reporting, you can't make a good decision. Numbers don't lie on so many levels.
Look, many would disagree, but the types of things we're talking about, you're right. And even if they're not entirely 100% correct, they give you the trend. You know, there might be a jump for, say, COVID, but when you start looking at it, the patterns over a 5, 10, 20-year period, you can see what's actually happening long term.
Yes, and that's what we've got to look at. You know, man, this is getting big and deep, isn't it?
Well, we've only really started getting into the detail of strategic planning, so...
Yes, and it's a big discussion. And obviously from my position, we don't see much. All we're trying to do is help your mums and dads and developers and people with businesses develop the buildings for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes when I'm working for certain businesses or developers, we're looking for key areas. And we know areas they want to be at. You know, for some of them, we're looking for an arterial to get their trucks in and out of. Or they need to be close to town to be able to service town because that's what the business does. And it gets really interesting trying to figure that and look for those possibilities. And then things don't become available. And in some cases, the business says, it's too hard, I'm not going here.
Yeah, it's almost like we need a state agency that deals with, I don't know, strategically planning infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. But I talk to a lot of the real estate agents, especially in the commercial space, and they're all great guys and they're doing their job, but trying to find things for potential customers when there's growth. You know, we've had this run after COVID and there's big growth in business and moving, and then business want to grow to that next level. And sometimes when, I'll use example out at the airport at Evandale, there's a big subdivision that's going in, but there's been one failure, and that is the power supply. Now, there's a whole bunch of stories going around that they can't get enough power, and they need a lot because there's some big proposed businesses moving out there, but they're saying, this is going to take 12 months. Now, I don't know if it's due to lack of planning or whether it's Tas Network's problems or it's someone else's problem or they can't get the equipment from overseas. I don't know. I can't answer that. But man, it's taking a long time.
And unfortunately, that's where the lack of a central state agency to help coordinate redevelopment, or in cases like that, greenfield development for major projects, is actually taking a toll on everybody, because that means those jobs aren't there, those people aren't coming to our area, they're not spending their money in their local shops, we're not getting tourism benefits.
But also the businesses aren't going to move in. Well, I'm not going to come here. I'm not going to come to this part of the state. I'm going to another part of the state. But they might say, well, I'm not coming to the state at all. It's not worth my while. I'll just ship everything over.
And given some of the issues that we're finding with housing supply, the long-term trend, I'm hearing more and more about businesses that, you know, they might get one or two people to start, but after a week of them staying in a hotel because there's no dwellings for them,
that's right,
they have to go. They have to leave.
Yes, exactly. We're not going to solve all this, are we?
Not with one bottle, no.
No. I think we need a cellar. But anyway.
Well, you're the designer. Make it happen.
Well, it can be done.
We might start wrapping up because
we could go on for a fair while.
Yeah, we could chat
this
for a while.
This is like what I did with Toby when we were doing thermal assessments and just trying to, look at the well-being and healthiness of homes and getting thermal performance. It's never ending.
Exactly.
It's great. I love this.
And look, the thing about town planning is it really comes down to how you live. And I give my partner the irrits because whenever we travel, you look at this. Oh, that's urban design. Oh, that's retail planning. Oh, that's transport. Isn't this a nice place? Isn't this a great park? Let's go for a walk. And it never stops.
I totally agree because I drive my partner nuts with this. So I'm walking through Sydney. My head's up. I'm looking up at infrastructure and really cool architecture and details in the ground and looking all around and so this is awesome, or that wasn't a good idea. Even from an accessibility point of view, I'm looking intently at a lot of things as well, and heritage buildings, and says yes.
Sorry, Amelia.
That's all right. So what are the take-home points for anyone that doesn't understand planning? They might feel like that they want access to any kind of resources. What do they do to learn more?
First step is obviously talk to yourselves. And the second one would be contact council, because every council has a planning department. They all, or mostly, have staff who will deal with questions and answers at the counter, or you can make an appointment. And that's the first step. But the big one is if you want to buy a block of land to do something, talk to your conveyancer, get the wording for the conditional contract of sale so you get approval to do what you want on the block of land.
That's a great one.
That's a good point, yeah.
Don't let the emotions get in the way, but it's hard to say. For me to say that, I totally get it. People get emotional. Found the perfect block, found the house that we can renovate or do whatever, and then haven't done the research.
Yeah, and I've done that. There's a couple of houses I looked at before I bought my current place, and I absolutely loved them. I'd happily live there.
Yes.
But due to other issues, I didn't buy them.
Yeah, and that's right. But you know how to look for that.
I do.
Yes.
And most people, if you're looking for something, generally you can go onto the Plan Build website, you can do a property inquiry. It will give you somewhere to start. It identifies particularly the zoning, so what you can do, and it identifies the codes that usually control the overlays and the hazards.
Yeah, you're dead right. You may not understand the language.
But that's when you can talk to Frank or council or somebody like me.
And there's heaps of guys, designers, architects all around the place. And they'll be more than happy to help you to decipher a lot of this stuff. And most councils are very helpful with that.
And so are conveyancing people.
Yes, very true. Yes, I forget them. They're a vital part of what we do.
But the first contact is usually with council. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's after the contract is settled.
Yes, and that's the challenge. Don't let it settle until you know all your information.
Exactly.
Yes, because, we've had some very unfortunate things where they just can't do what they were hoping to do.
Yeah, it does happen.
Yeah, and it's even worse when it's commercial.
Yeah, I have some commercial clients, yeah.
Yeah, it's true though. I had one just recently and it was more of a building code issue. It says, dude, next time, like we're getting to the end of it now and we've got it sorted, but it was so painful and technically difficult and it's cost him, it's like his budget blew out by 3 times. Yeah, it was massive. And I said, next time you're looking at stuff, just call me. Let's go through this, what you want to do, because ticked off, frustrated, and I'm explaining it. Call us experts. I call you for what you do. He's an expert in his field. I call him for that. Call me.
Yeah. And that's probably the other thing. If you are speaking to your local politician, ask where the training is and the public information on the planning system. Because unless you start asking for it out there in the wider community, it will not be done.
I reckon we can do that.
Yeah.
I know some people.
You know a lot of people.
Well, we have to in our game.
Yeah,
We do, yes.
that's true. Yeah.
You know, and we only want the betterment of our state at the end of the day. And we love living here and we want it to be better, and especially the future.
We might wrap it up there. That's a great place to finish, Frank. Mick, thank you so much for coming on to our 50th episode podcast. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks for being able to be part of it, and happy 50th.
Thanks very much, Mick. Appreciate it.
Are there any places where people can find you online or social media?
Not really a social media person, but my company, Town Planning Solutions, does have a website. So that is, I think it's number one on the Google search if you actually look it up.
Excellent. All right, thanks for listening to the Building Design Primetime Podcast.
Catch us later.
Bye.
You're listening to the Building Design Primetime Podcast.